Hey, welcome to the Edward Jones Beat Reporter Inbox. I'm Jordan Bastian, MLB.com's Indians beat writer, here with Sandy, who's going to be asking me your questions. Sandy, what do we got out of the chute here?
Okay, first question is from Brian. Do you see Tomlin and Merritt on the opening day roster, or is one of them traded?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting scenario. Right now, I think, talking to manager Terry Francona, he said track record's going to play a big role. I think that's where Josh Tomlin has the edge. He's the longest tenured player in the organization, and the rotation is full right now. Mike Clevenger's projected to be on the staff, barring any setbacks this spring. So that puts Ryan Merritt in a difficult spot. He has to compete for a spot in the bullpen or, hope for an opening within that rotation. He's out of options, so if they get closer to the end of spring and there's no room in the inn, the Indians very likely could explore trades for Merritt.
Okay, next question is from AV. Who do you think is better defensively behind the plate, Yan or Perez?
Yeah, Yan and Roberto were both close, and I think that's one thing the Indians really love about their catching situation is it's kind of a 1A, 1B setup here. It's not a traditional starting catcher who's going to log a ton of the innings and the other guy's going to back up occasionally. Defensively, I would give Yan the edge in terms of throwing, but Roberto, when it comes to blocking balls, when it comes to framing pitches, if you look at the metrics, he kind of has the edge there. It's going to be close to see who has the bulk of the innings this season. It might be a kind of a timeshare.
Next question is from Kyle. It's still early, but is Davis and Upton expected to make the squad?
Yeah, Melvin Upton Jr. and Rajay Davis are both in camp on minor league contracts, non-roster invites. But as Michael Brantley keeps trying to come back from his ankle injury, he still hasn't advanced to base running or getting into Cactus League games. Guys like Davis and Upton are really going to be right in the thick of the mix. With so many left-handed hitting outfielders, the Indians would like to have a right-handed complement to mix in there. And if Brantley's not ready by opening day, there's a chance that both of them could make the team.
Okay, Marty wants to know, what do you think the chances are of Shaffer making the team?
Yeah, Richie Shaffer is an interesting guy. As Terry Francona likes to put it, he's got a lot of sock in his bat. He's been bouncing between first base and third base to kind of show a little bit of versatility. But it's tough. I mean, he's a guy that's not really in a position to make the team right now. But as the Indians have seen over the last few years with plenty of guys, anything can happen. And if there's a door that opens or an injury, something like that, he could be one of the next men up.
Okay, Joshua wants to know, are the Indians still trying to trade Edwin Encarnacion?
Yeah, there were rumors over the winter that, they were exploring deals for Edwin Encarnacion. I haven't heard anything to suggest those are ongoing. I think at the time when those rumors came out, the reality for the Indians was if they wanted to make an impact acquisition, they might have had to free up payroll. So it made sense for them to maybe see what teams might be interested in a guy like Edwin or a guy like Jason Kipnis. That's kind of where those rumors came out. But right now, I don't see, as they're positioned right now going into the year, that they're looking to do that at all. He's a big part of that middle of the lineup.
Okay, Jill wants to know, what can we expect from a healthy Bradley Zimmer this year?
That's going to be another interesting one. I thought what really was telling was in August when he went through a big slump. He was still in the lineup out there every day. That's because the Indians really value what he brings defensively and with his base running, not just offensively. So, it's going to be an intriguing guy to watch this year, whether or not they're going to try and limit his exposure to left-handed pitching or because of the value that he brings in other areas to run him out there every day. But a guy I'm kind of looking forward to seeing over a full season what he could do. A lot of power in that bat, a lot of speed in those legs.
Okay, Kurt wants to know, how many wins do you think the Indians can win this year?
Oh, put me on the spot here. Win total. I don't think this team is built like the 102-win team that they were a year ago. That said, the landscape in the AL Central, really looks like this is the Indians' division to lose. They look like a postseason team. They look like the division winner, and based on that alone, I'd put them in that 92 to 95 win range.
Carl asks, do the Tribe have enough pitching this season to compete?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, last year, the pitching staff as a whole, talking from Corey Kluber all the way down to closer Cody Allen, set a single-season record for a team WAR. They topped one of the 90s Braves teams in that regard when you look at WAR on Fangraphs. The only significant loss they took on the mound over the winter was Brian Shaw. There's one of their main setup men. So they're returning with virtually the entire rotation intact, nearly the same bullpen. There could be some guys leaving in free agency next year, but the rotation and the bullpen are set up right now to once again potentially be a historic staff.
So Ethan wants to know, where does the team view Mejia right now? Do they see him as a part of a future core of some sort, or do they see him as a replacement to Gomes and Perez?
Yeah, I think the plan right now is to open with Yan and with Roberto behind the plate. They really like Mejia's bat. That's why you saw in the Arizona Fall League he played some third base. As Terry Francona's like to say, it's not an indictment on his catching. It's that they feel he's so advanced as a hitter, they're trying to find ways to expedite his path to the big leagues. So they're really impressed with this young player, the top prospect in the Indian system, according to MLB Pipeline. Also considered the top catching prospect. Could be a midseason call-up if there's something goes wrong with Gomes or Perez. Right now, he looks like he'll open the year in the minor leagues, but he could play some other positions, maybe play a little outfield, because if they feel his bat's ready and he can make an impact, they don't want to stand in the way of that.
Casey asks, is this the year for Kipnis to bounce back?
Yeah, I think Kip has shown that in the past. He's had injury-marred seasons before, kind of return with a chip on his shoulder and come out strong. 2016 comes to mind in that regard. He's kind of a guy on a mission right now. He heard all the trade rumors over the winter. He read all the tweets that fans were sending to him and all the articles that were written. He read those too. And he's obviously come out with a strong spring so far. 6 homers out of the chute, leading spring training. He's kind of on a mission to show that, he's still the player he was a couple years ago.
Todd wants to know, will Tyler Naquin make the Indians' opening day roster?
That's going to be another tough one. A lot's going to depend on Brantley's situation, as I mentioned earlier. A couple springs ago, there was an opening, and Tyler Naquin really kind of forced the Indians' hand. But that was when Bradley Zimmer was still developing in the minor leagues. So with Zimmer now sort of entrenched in center field, it's going to be an uphill battle for a guy like Naquin. But that's great experience depth to have right there behind the major league roster if he doesn't make the opening day team.
Bruce wants to know, is the pitching or the hitting ahead at this point of spring?
I think the pitchers are always ahead of the hitters. I don't know. We could debate that one. It's tough to say. What I will say is when you're looking at spring training pitching lines, you can't evaluate it by that. You got to look at the quality of the hitters they're facing. You kind of have to understand what a pitcher is working on. Like when Corey Kluber works today, he's going to be working on something specific. And if he gives up hits on certain pitches, he might continue to throw those pitches just because he's trying to refine it. And with hitters, kind of the same thing. Maybe they're trying to improve one specific area of their game, so you might see results that aren't necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in the regular season. So it's kind of hard to say.
Joe's question, how will the impact of Callaway leaving affect the pitching staff?
Yeah, I really don't see it having as big of an impact as it might have a few years ago when many of these starting pitchers were still kind of coming into their own. They brought back Carl Willis, a veteran pitching coach who's handled veteran pitching staffs, and I think that's what the Indians pitching staff is right now. I mean, these guys are not developing for the most part. Corey Kluber has 2 Cy Young Awards now. Carrasco, a guy like Josh Tomlin, those guys, they are who they are at this point. They don't necessarily need a coach to make a ton of tweaks in that regard. I think Carl Willis is the perfect guy to come in here and run the staff. And I think these pitchers at this point know what to do in spring training and during the season.
Chris' question is, who's an under-the-radar guy making the most noise in camp so far?
Maybe not statistically, but a guy that they're really excited about behind the scenes has been Bobby Bradley, first base prospect. The guy dropped 30 pounds over the winter, but is still, comes in here with a powerful type swing. They signed Yonder Alonso, so there's not really a path for Bobby Bradley at the moment, but they're really excited about what he's done over the winter to position himself for the next few years.
Kelly wants to know, when can we expect Brantley back?
Yeah, again, I mean, right now he's working through agility stuff. He's done some outfield work. He's been hitting against live pitching. The only thing he hasn't done to this point is base running and get into Cactus League games. So once those steps start taking place, we'll have a firmer grasp on whether or not he'll be ready for opening day. I think the good news is when you look back compared to a year ago he couldn't really do as much hitting because it was a shoulder injury. Because it was an ankle injury this time around, he's been in the cage, he's been doing all his hitting stuff. So when that other aspects of his rehab are in place, the hitting will come along quickly, and I don't think, so he could push for opening day, if not maybe shortly into April.
Jason's question, do the Indians believe in their farm system enough to keep things going for the next 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, I think part of the equation there is guys who have recently graduated to the big leagues, guys like we've talked about, guys like Bradley Zimmer, A guy like Mike Clevenger now in the rotation. But that's going to be an important thing for the next few years because, as everyone kind of knows, Cody Allen and Andrew Miller could be free agents next year. A lot of the core guys could be free agents next year. Guys like Brantley, Tomlin, Chisenhall, a guy in the bullpen, Zach McAllister. So you're going to start looking to the farm system. Mejia's an intriguing guy, as we've talked about. I think Tristan McKenzie's a very promising pitching prospect, but he's a few years away. But there is still talent. Bobby Bradley, as I mentioned, there's still talent in the fold that hopefully can sustain this beyond just this year.
Pete wants to know who's the funniest player right now in the clubhouse.
Funniest player, that's tough. I mean, I think Lindor kind of cracks us up. We saw yesterday, hit a home run, missed first base. He was laughing the whole time. Behind the scenes, the biggest prankster, I think, is Terry Francona, actually. And a guy that's kind of sneaky funny is Corey Kluber. A lot of the pranks that you see happen during the year, a lot of those are Corey Kluber, whether you believe it or not.
Danny wants to know, do you like Lindor's new hairstyle?
Well, I actually complimented him because I'm going gray a little early here. And I said, on behalf of all us prematurely graying folks, thank you for making gray hair cool again. But no, I think, hey, it fits him. He looks like Cisco. I remember that song, when I was back in high school. Yeah, I don't mind it.
Frank's question, what can we expect from Andrew Miller this year? Will his arm be okay with the amount of work he's had?
Yeah, I think one of the blessings of the injury last year would be that he didn't log as many innings as he did in the prior season. So, he's healthy now. He's not coming off as big of a workload as he did in 2016 when he kind of put the team on his shoulders in the playoffs and logged a ton of innings the regular season. So I think he's positioned well in that regard this year.
Gustavo wants to know more about Yan Gomes. What can you say about him?
That's pretty broad. But I did write a story over the offseason about some of his unique training over the winter. He actually did some MMA style boxing in his spare time, and they said he actually had a move, they call him the Yanimal there, and he has a specific takedown move. So I don't know if we need to watch out for that when runners are coming to the plate or anything like that this year. But Jan's a good guy, pretty unique story, be the first Brazilian-born player to be drafted in the majors and then to make it to the big leagues, and a core part of this team. All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining the Edward Jones Beat Reporter Inbox. Tune in next time. Thanks for all the questions, guys.